What is today's date?
What's today's date? The 9th?
9, yeah.
Right?
Yep. 7,
Yep, okay, the 9th.
9, 20, 25.
We are recording.
Okay.
We are recording. We're here today with Leah McBain at the library, Sally Harris, and Judy LaPorte, and I will be interviewing you. Will you tell me your name and your birthday year?
Henry Thomas Jr. in 1949.
And how long have you lived here in Newbury?
Lived here full time since 70, but was up weekends, vacations here, there, and that's all my life.
Where did you stay when you came up, weekends and so forth?
It started out when I was probably this big, up at Sunapee Harbor in some of the cottages up there. Then we went to as I grew up, numerous different cottages. The White Shutters in Sunapee Harbor.
Oh,
Yep.
yes.
Yeah, they were rental cottages, now they're condos. And then Babe Sargent's up at George's Mills. And Young's Cabins on the right-hand side of the lake coming from George's Mills at Sunapee Harbor. I think it was called Young's.
Those ones right up close in George's Mills there?
Yeah.
There are condos now, I think, too.
No, those because I worked on most of those and made them into homes.
Okay,
The ones that are really close to the
Yeah, yeah.
harbor. Yeah.
okay.
And that's so numerous places. And then the last place my father and mother really liked Larry Bonner, staying with Larry and he'd say, oh, I got a cabin open this weekend. So we'd come up. Then in 64, I think it was, they bought some land in Birchfield from Arthur Larson and I forget the other partner's name. And then decided to build a house. And probably by about 66 of that, we were staying in that house every chance we got, working on it, my father and I, to finish it up.
Where were you coming here from?
From Needham, Mass.
Needham, Mass.
Yeah.
So you went to school in Needham?
Graduated Needham High, went to Northeastern University, and then in 1970 started a construction company up here in Newbury. Started with framing, did a lot of framing for Jack Kelly in Ramblewood and other places in town, and then expanded my business.
Did you ever do any work on his buildings in Warner? Jack Kelly's?
No.
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 I remember when you were renovating Howard Eaton's house.
Yes.
That's when I first met you. and
Yeah.
you guys, yeah.
So tell us anything about your parents, how,
Well, they just fell in love with the area and couldn't wait till they totally retired to come up here full time, which they did, and lived in the house in Birchfield. First, I stayed there for a while, and then until I built my own house in 1980 over on Morse Lane.
and your mother lived to be?
I'd been 95, maybe. Don't
Yeah.
quote me on that.
Yeah.
But she lived a long life. My father was well into his 80s. He was 10 years older.
And you have siblings?
2 sisters. One lives in Southgate Road, and the other lives in Shrewsbury, Mass.
And you have children?
Yes. I have one child, Hurla, from my first marriage, and then 3 stepchildren, Brian, Kim, and Kelly, from my marriage with Helga.
And you want to tell us anything about Helga?
Well, Helga was just as involved in the town as I was. She wasn't a fireman or that, but she was, from cleaning town offices, cleaning the bathrooms, doing all the planters around town. Before we had the beautification, that was her job, and she'd clean and then do flowers, water the flowers, and keep it up, clean the beach and that, until finally she downsized to just cleaning the fire department, and then downsized even more to just relaxing and puttering around her own garden.
And how many years did you tell me you've been a fireman?
Well, I got my anniversary thing from the town, 53.
Wow.
53 years. I got that in my last week's paycheck.
Can you talk a little bit about that, like how you started what drew you to the fire department and about your career
I think
there?
some of the, I met some of the people in town that were members, like Harold Folsom, Howard Eaton, back then, Mike Crowdo, and Clark Davis, and they sort of like, come on by. I figured, they don't want me. I'm just a young kid, and they put me on board. I wrote a letter and I was interested in joining, and they voted me in, and then it wasn't too long after that. They just said, well, you're really involved, so you're going to be assistant chief. And that's under Clark Davis. So that was way back. I don't think I was on when Wayne LaPorte was chief. But Mike Crowdo was chief after Clark.
Yeah.
Then Scott Wheeler, and I was his assistant. I was assistant throughout. And then I stepped in as chief after Scott. And that was 43 years ago.
So
Wow.
how old were you when you first joined?
I must have been like 22. Yeah.
So you probably were the youngest member, except for Mike Crotto. He
Yeah.
started, I think, when he was about 12.
Yeah, he was. Yeah, he worked an unbelievable amount of years, like 75 years on the fire department. He started when he was 12, 13, putting out fires along the railroad track, going through town here, and that as a kid. And I can remember back when the tourist train used to come up through town from Bradford, and the once a week a freight train with a couple cars would come up through and go to Claremont from Concord. And then I remember them when they tore that all out.
Now, there were a lot of fires caused because the trains burn coal.
I'm not too sure if it was the engines putting sparks out or the metal to metal on the track, a spark going off and dry conditions. And in Needham, I lived near tracks too. There was a lot of fires along those tracks too. And I think it's maybe the sparks from the steel wheels on the steel tracks.
And of course, they had to be checked. I mean, because otherwise the fires would really.
Yeah, spread out.
Are there some things, like stories from the fire department that stand out for you over your years there? Or things that happened, or?
A lot. I've seen a little bit of everything over the years.
Some of them
And
you
that-
probably don't want to tell publicly.
Right. Some are pretty rough stories in that. But it was interesting that I remember the time that somehow Arthur Jones let me know that, what was his name up on Rollins? Willie Rollins?
Oh, the Will
Willie
Rollins.
Rollins. He was the only one left. The other, Needham, had died, I guess. I remember them coming down to the trading post in the horse and buggy to get a week's worth of beans, beer, and other things to take back up to the house. And then but the night the house caught on fire, I got wind of it, and then I got to the station, no one's around, and I just pulled that. We had to let people know the outdoor siren way back when, and then it ended up. By the time we got there, it burned to the ground. But the notification system I don't think was working too well. We were probably on a red phone system at that point. But that I know Judy's been working on the little history there with our historical committee on the fire department on how it works. But I remember it all, from the red phones to the plectrons to the pagers. And now we've got on our phone active 911.
Everybody gets notified at once now.
Yeah.
Used to be one person.
One
had to let
person, and
everybody
we'd have
else.
to make phone calls or have Helga make the phone calls so I could leave to get to the fire.
Yeah, I did the
But
same
back
thing
then,
with
there wasn't
Wayne.
that many, back then, in the beginning, there were if there was 2 calls a month, that was a lot.
Yeah.
Because we only really went to fires. You didn't have people with smoke detectors going off. They didn't have them. You didn't have people, medical calls. They took care of themselves. Or Arthur Jones would come by in a station wagon, had a little cot in the back, and if you couldn't sit in a seat, he got you in the cot and took you up to New London Hospital. And that's what medical was in town way back in the 70s.
And now you have more medical calls than fires, don't you?
It's about the 50-50 because a lot of them are CO and smoke detector calls and that. And then a lot of them are like a lift assist. We don't really deem it a medical call because we're not transporting them to the hospital. We're just helping them back into a chair or back into the bed because, they're elderly and that people are living longer and they need help from time
And
to
people
time.
appreciate the fire department so much for coming like that. I know you help Wayne a lot of times.
I have a crazy question
Yeah.
about the sound. I remember in summers when we were on the dock at noon every day that,
Yeah.
did someone just watch their watch and say it's noon?
I think it was done on a timer,
Okay,
to be honest
Oh,
with you.
okay.
I think it was done on a timer.
okay.
And then I don't remember back, I guess way back before we had the siren, which was a big red siren on the roof of the original firehouse, and that they would ring the church bells in the center meeting house and that to notify and that. But and then the sirens had two blasts were South Newbury, 3, don't quote me on this, 3 blasts were Mount Sunapee, Blodgett's Landing 4, so you'd know what part of town to head to.
And was it the original firehouse that you started out in down
Yeah.
there? Okay.
It was the one that was the gray one right close on the road.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's
And
the
then
one
that
that
was
burned
that
down,
was
right?
it. And then my company put the addition off the back of that to make it bigger so we could have more trucks. And then it burned but just gutted it. And that point in time we decided to move further back from the road, keep the section that my company had built and add on to the back of that. So that was masonry blocks. Ken St. Cyr, who was a mason in town, he did the masonry on that building for me and that. So that was sort of the history of that. And then, of course, the firehouse expanded another time to give the police department more room.
When did that burn?
Do you remember when the firehouse burned?
I just saw that.
Was it 90s?
No, it'd be in the 80s.
80s.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do you remember when a firehouse in Blodgett's was built? Or was that already there when you were a child?
It was there. We have pictures of it being built with all like used lumber over in the historical building over there. We'll eventually have pictures and that of it being built. And then there was 2 houses, 2 trucks housed in that. Which is now the antique at this station, and then a small little tanker was up there side by side. Then it came to the era the trucks got bigger and that, and we lifted it up in the air, made it higher, and put one bigger door in to get the bigger truck in the center, so that it went from a 2-bay station to a single-bay station. But I don't remember. There is some history. Fire department started in 27. We found that out. We have the original meeting minutes of when it was formed and some of the other paperwork of the amount of monies they were looking for. And what we're hoping to do is to get some of this paperwork, send it out and have it scanned and put it into a computer system so you could search like Blodgett's Landing Fire Station and anything to do with that would come up.
Yeah.
And that Newbury fireboat, like their first fireboat was the Aquabat, which was, and it was a funny thing, a couple, maybe last year, people called me and said, "You know anything about the Aquabat?" Somebody said it was a fireboat, and I said it most definitely was a fireboat. It was made into that. Clark Davis and a bunch of guys worked on that. I helped. I was one of the captains on it to drive it, and it was made into the first fireboat on the lake. And then it ended up breaking down. Couldn't fix it, and it ended up Clark Davis sold it to Patton's Auto Body, and I researched with Patton's because I wanted to find the history if it's still around, and Patton's didn't have any idea of what happened to it.
So now you have a different one.
Yeah, now we have the other one that was bought in the late 80s, and actually then we have another one we just acquired 2 years ago from the Coast Guard. So we have two fireboats in the lake.
Do you still keep an engine in Blodgett's?
Yes, yes, a fairly good engine, yeah, ready to roll. It's got 1,500 gallons of water on it, 1,500 gallon minute pipe, all the equipment on it to match what's in this station, so it's still there. And it moves up if there's something big in town anywhere. And obviously, if it's something in Blodgett, it'll probably be the first piece on scene.
What was life like here in Newbury as a child when you were coming up?
Very, very small, and as you get to know people, like coming up to the store, and you know, it was Larson owned it way back then. But I think when I moved in '70, there was 400 people in town, if I remember right, and you sort of got to know them all. Now we're up to, you know, maybe 2,500 residents year round, but yet it could be 5,000 people live in this town now with second homes that aren't really residents.
Yeah.
And that, so it was totally different. Traffic wasn't, you know, there wasn't as many stop signs because you didn't have to, you just creep through intersections because there was nobody coming.
Yeah.
But now they're adding stop signs here and there as the population increases.
Did you spend a lot of time at the dock?
Yeah, I got to know a lot of the local people that lived here year round, even though as a young kid, I was only here during summers and that, but we'd hang out together with...
Who were some of the people you hung around with?
The Joneses, the two girls, Elaine and Pam. Then Alice, Lynn's two daughters, that would be Pam too?
Yeah, Pam and
Elaine?
yeah.
Yeah, Pam and Elaine. And then across the street, who now, his father was across, Chucky Yale, his son now is chief in Hopkinton Fire. And that's funny because I chat with him and tell him how I knew his father. And then the Inghams over here on the lake. I'd stay sometimes, you know, before the house was done, I'd stay up with them for 2-3 weeks at a time at the Ingham's cottage. And then up on the hill here, above here, the Ingham's grandmother had a little tiny camp, and we'd stay up there in order to just be on Lake Sunapee.
I didn't ask you what your dad did for work.
He was a salesman, packaging equipment. And then also he was involved, and that's probably why I got involved with police in that. He was a called part-time police officer in both the city of Boston and in Needham. And he was the chief of the Needham Auxiliary Police, which had certain details and things they were responsible for. And that he was never a fireman, but he was a police officer. And that, so that's probably why in '80 I joined the Newbury Police Department with Arthur Jones asked me, and I joined under Arthur.
And now you work with the Bradford
Police, yeah.
Oh, you do?
Yeah.
So when you joined here, you did part-time on top of your building
Yeah.
business and on top of being the fire chief.
Yeah. And then also for 6 years, I was fire chief, police sergeant, and selectman.
Yeah.
And worked. That's when you could get a lot done in 50, 60 hours a week, you know?
That's
But now it's getting hard to get things done. Because I'm still involved with the three things. Well, except selectmen. But I'm on zoning board. That's where I go tonight for a meeting. So that doesn't take as much, obviously, as selectmen, but...
Are there any people from back your childhood here in Newbury that you remember specifically? I mean, you mentioned Arthur Larson.
But that stood out as important
Yes.
people in town or that made a mark on Newbury.
Well, Larry Bonner was unique. Guy sitting there on the top of his stairs in his chair, smoking a big cigar, selling boats, and you know, he had the gas pumps and rented dock space, similar to, you know, now it's a condo dock system.
Yeah.
And that owned a motel up the street, which is now storage, but that was taken down. It's all storage garages.
Yeah.
And he had the roller skating. We'd go to Sunapee Harbor and go roller skating. He owned that. And then also we take the boat up to George's Mills to see Aerosmith when he first started.
In that
Steve
bar up
Tyler.
there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the Deekmans, of course, I knew all the Deekmans. There's another family that I knew them all. And
Were
that,
you same age as who? Of the
Which
Probably-
Deacon?
probably,
Paul?
well, Paul was older.
Paul.
Probably Peter.
Peter.
Probably Peter.
Yeah.
Yeah, and Bruce Farnham, and Richard LaPorte, the gas station. We'd go visit him at the gas station, and of course Farnham worked at the gas station back when.
What did you do for fun as high school kid, high school year here in town?
Swim, water ski, that.
Did you
And
ever
then-
dance?
Ski, dance.
Yeah.
Well, we went to up to George's Mills, and that I guess there was people dancing, but we didn't dance. Probably shy, afraid of girls or something.
Did you join? Well, yeah, you joined organizations, the fire department.
Yeah.
You didn't ever join the Grange.
No.
Weren't active in the church. You were.
We're in and out of the church active.
Yeah.
But I help them out now yearly with the chicken barbecue, which I got to pick the date for yet.
The chicken barbecue. Did you start the chicken barbecue with them, or was it already?
I don't know if that was already going, and I got asked to do it one year.
I think
Might have
you
been.
started it.
Did they?
Because it's the Thomas family recipe.
Oh
Yeah.
they. Oh, it's wonderful, absolutely wonderful. You told us about your occupation. You didn't really. Yeah, you raised children here in Newbury or Bradford.
Newbury, yeah.
Yeah, Newbury.
Yeah.
Was
My 3 stepchildren were raised out of the Morse Lane house.
And talk
Yeah.
a little bit about raising kids here, what it was like for.
It wasn't too bad. I made sure they had, I actually built it before I built the house. I built the barn because I had to house 2 ponies because the apartment we were in short-term in Bradford didn't like the fact I had a pony in the backyard for the kids. So I built the barn up there in Morse Lane first, and the kids had 2 ponies. One of them was a pony that came from railroad tracks down there. The old
The horse barn,
the
that little horse
No,
barn?
well, it was our little pony.
was it your pony?
Yeah, Shetland. Yeah, Little
Yeah.
Red.
But
Yeah,
wasn't
Little
there-
Red.
Yeah,
Yeah,
Little Red.
Yeah, we got that. Got for the kids, and we needed 2 because there was two girls. Brian wasn't. He was more interested in dirt bikes and stuff like that.
There was a little structure along the railroad tracks.
It was an old service or maintenance shed.
Yeah,
that
and
what
we
that
made
was?
Didn't you
we
own
made
it?
it into a horseback.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, because
Yeah.
when I used to, so Phil Diekman was my age, and we used to hang around on the
Yeah.
dock, and we used to go up to they call it the horse barn.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was, okay.
Then we bought the horse from the Davises, and then we had the little pony we got over in Claremont.
Mhm,
And we
mhm.
sold the pony to the guys.
Yeah.
He was a sweetie.
Yeah, he was.
Did you have a sense of Newbury as a unique place?
It's just a place that got used to, and I liked it better than Sunapee George's Mills or Sunapee Harbor and that. It was just I liked Newbury Harbor and that, and of course all the friends that I met here.
And how was the mountain? The ski area was running.
Oh yeah.
Did you ski?
Oh, yeah.
ever?
Yeah, I skied there all the time. One year I skied there, I think I made every day. Until my
Wow.
business got too busy and I stepped away from it for a while, but then got back into it. I sponsored a race team and we raced on Fridays, and that got me back into looking forward to skiing. We did that for 20 plus years, racing on Fridays.
And you had to work hours to make up for it.
Yeah.
Did you get a lot of calls up to the mountain on the fire department for injuries, or?
No, ever since I used to, back in the 70s, I'd help out the ski patrol because I was on Bradford ambulance at that time, as well as Newbury Fire. And I'd had all you needed then was advanced first aid and some training at the mountain. So I'd help them out, volunteered to help them out on their calls at the mountain and sweep the slopes at the end of the day to make sure there was nobody straggling or off the side of the trail and that. But most of the calls were handled by the ski patrol, and just the ambulance, it was Newport way back, would come in on any transports. Now it's New London ambulance. But every once in a while we get called for something major they need more manpower for.
Yeah.
Do you ever get a fire call for the mountain, anything?
Luckily it's just been alarm activations and broken sprinklers,
Oh,
which gets a little wet inside the buildings, and I rush up there to try to shut them down and save the damage.
what breaks them?
Water gets into them when it's not supposed to, and they freeze. Yeah. They're supposed to, some of the systems are called dry systems. They're pressurized with air. The air leaks out, the water then goes into them, and then can freeze and break.
Are there any local stories or legends that you remember?
Can't remember any.
Is there anything else that you'd like to talk about? Usually people talk a lot after we shut the
Yeah, we
recording
shut off the
off.
camera every time people were like, oh, yeah.
Yeah. Offhand, they can't.
What
You know,
would
it's good
you
with questions.
say about life in Newbury to future generations? What would you say about life now to future generations?
Well, I think for future, it's a lot better than a lot of communities, you know what I mean, around the state or around the country. I think it's a good community, it's controlled, so our growth is good, and we're sort of lucky that a lot of the land isn't buildable because of the terrain and elevations and that. So we're not going to see it overcrowded. It's going to grow some more, but not drastically. So it'll be a small community where you get to know a lot of people, even though you can't know them all anymore. And that, like the old days. Then of course, yeah, you'd see people at the transfer station, which people still do, meet at the transfer station, say hello. Many years ago, we used to go up there, and that was a battle for the fire department because they'd burn the garbage up there, and they'd get carried away or get down into the rat tunnels underneath the hillside and burn forever. We'd have to bring, Scott Wheeler brought his backhoe up there once, and we kept digging up fire and putting it out because it was burning underground.
Rat holes?
Yeah,
Rat tunnels.
So
rat
I never-
tunnels.
I mean, I remember burning at the dump. I didn't know there were rat
Yeah,
holes.
they'd get down into it because it was just, it would be buried. A little bit of the garbage wouldn't get burned; it'd get buried, like, and then the rats would be down in there. And if the fire got in, there'd be
Oh,
paper
my
and
God.
stuff could catch on fire.
Oh, I guess there must have been rats. Where
Yeah.
did they all go?
I don't know. Why?
Well, they don't have open garbage there now, you see.
Yeah.
Right, I guess they can.
Everybody
close that
just took their garbage there and dumped it.
I don't know. I don't know where they end up going. They like to hang out at farms,
up. Yeah.
horse farms, cow farms, up on
You don't want to know where they
No,
go.
I'd never think of rats in New Hampshire.
up at the big farm on South Road there, up the hill. There's probably some.
Probably.
Yeah, but the rats, you know, I remember off the track of being in Newbury. I was down in Baltimore sitting there at the conference, and we were outside of the restaurant. All of a sudden I looked, there was a rat running across. It was outside dining. I said, my God, look at that.
Plenty of food.
Yeah. They're looking up the scraps people drop.
But that just never occurred to me that there were fires underground up
Yeah.
there.
Yeah.
But I suppose they were always burning up there, so.
Yeah. Always burning. Every once in a while I get carried away, and it'd spread through the wind and that.
Scary.
But that was Frank Bushway, who lived up on the Heights. He was the in charge of the transfer station.
That's everything. Nothing else you want to talk about? And Leah, anything else you can think of?
Nothing I can think of now.
Thank you, Hank.
All right,
Appreciate
very
it.
good. Hopefully it helped you some.